Jambo, and welcome to episode 150 of AviaDev Insight Africa, the podcast offering a window to the world of African aviation with your host, John Howell, CEO and founder of AviaDev Africa. I'd like to start by saying a massive thank you to our listeners. Although our great industry is, of course, going through one of its toughest periods, we hope that the podcast keeps you engaged, informed, and entertained. So thank you so much for sticking with us, and thanks to all of you for spreading the word. We now have over 40,000 listeners in 160 countries globally, and today we're making our way to East Africa and specifically Nairobi, Kenya, to speak with the Director General of the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, Mr. Gilbert Kibe. Mr. Kibe has huge experience in the aviation industry, and in addition to the position that he holds as Director General, he also holds the post of the current chairperson to the ICAO Regional Aviation Safety Group for Africa and the Indian Ocean Steering Committee, Civil Air Navigation Services Organization, or CANSO as we all know it, the Executive Committee as well. He is the immediate chairperson of the East African Community Civil Aviation Safety and Security Oversight Agency. And he's a very busy man, basically. So we're delighted that he is able to join us today. And he's somebody that's really helping to shape Africa's aviation future. So in this episode, we're going to focus on the impact and the response to the pandemic in Kenya, along with exploring the key areas of focus for the KCAA as we head into the uncharted waters of 2021 and beyond. So welcome to the podcast, Mr. Kibe.
Thank you very much, John. It's a pleasure to be here. Indeed, I am honored.
Fantastic. Well, we are absolutely delighted you've been able to make the time for us today to be with us. I've obviously given a few of your roles over there in the introduction, but I didn't really introduce you and your aviation sort of history. So would you like to enlighten the listeners as to when it all began, how it all began, and how it's progressed over the last years?
Well, yes, it would be a pleasure to do so. Today, I'm 58 years old. Since I was 10, I knew that I wanted to be a pilot. And therefore, so as things came out, when I finished my high school, I went for flying school. So I got my PPL when I was 17 years old. I got my CPL when I was 18. I never did go for the ATPL, but I started off as a flight instructor. Taught 32 students how to fly in a 2-year period. Then I became a charter pilot. I moved down to the coast of Malindi and Mombasa, where I stayed there for 12 years. So as a charter pilot, I was flying tourists, mainly to the game parks from the coast and around East Africa. And then later on, I decided with a couple of friends, why don't we start our own air charter company? Since we knew the people who were providing the business and we knew how to fly airplanes, all we needed to do was to acquire our own aircraft, which we managed to do. We started a little airline known as Eagle Aviation in 1986. So we grew that airline from one aircraft with 5 employees to the time of my retirement. There we had gone through 15 airplanes and 150 employees. And then it was a 10-year period as Eagle Aviation in Kenya. So we were the first to get into scheduled services in competition with our national carrier, Kenya Airways. So Eagle Aviation started doing domestic scheduled services between Mombasa and Nairobi, and we're going to our secondary airport, Wilson Airport. So that went well, and then I was head of business development for the company, so I began discussions with the managing director then, Brian Davis at Kenya Airways, and I told him, why don't we get together and do maybe an airline agreement and maybe a franchise agreement, that sort of thing. This was in 1996. And then, unfortunately, in 1997, there was a huge downturn in tourism. So the airline started losing money, and I had to quit. So I decided to sell my shareholding, and because at that time we had gotten into losses, we had never been into losses before. I thought it would be better just to leave the airline at that time. But then soon after I left, we finally got the contract with Kenya Airways, but I wasn't there anymore. So Eagle Aviation went on with Kenya Airways for a couple of years, and then they parted ways. After a while, I decided to start another charter company here in Nairobi, and it was known as Aero Kenya. A friend of mine, two of us, we started it. We started domestic scheduled services from Nairobi to a town called Eldoret. So we're doing that. It was quite successful. And then we moved on to Kitale, another small town. And then in 2008, we had the famous clashes, post-election violence problems that we had in Kenya. So really, we ran out of business and then had to shut it down. So thereafter, I decided, let me go back to my roots. I was started off as a flying instructor. Let me start a flying school. So I opened a flying school, Nairobi Flight Training. It still exists, but ever since I got this job, I had to leave it because the conflict of interest would not allow me to operate a school and be the Director General of Kenya Civil Aviation Authority. So that is the background of aviation and how I got into it. It was just something, as a kid, I had a passion to learn how to fly. But in the process, I learned how to do the business of aviation by running a couple of airlines and a flying school. So that is where I got now my business experience in aviation. And then in 2015, 5 years ago, I landed this job as the Director General of Kenya Civil Aviation Authority. So I guess that experience that I had, and in particular, running an airline until it really goes out of business, gave me good experience to know what to never do again. So I think that's how I got here. And then once I joined the authority, I gained now experience in being in government. In government, it's a very, very different realm to be in. But I got to learn the ropes. And then as I went along, I now started getting appointed to these various roles that I have. You mentioned that I'm the chairman of the ICAO Regional Aviation Safety Group for Africa. So I've been a chair now for 1 year. But I'm also the chair of another ICAO program known as the Africa Flight Procedure Program, AFPP. We have 36 African states who are members. And what we do is we assist partner states in building capacity in air traffic management. So we train air traffic control. We do procedure design mainly for instrument routes, standard instrument departures, arrivals, en route, airways. So I find that really interesting, and I somehow just managed to end up being the chairman of AFPP. And then 4 years ago, I was elected to be a board member of the Civil Air Navigation Service Organization, or CANSO. So I've been on the executive committee for 4 years. And then as things would have it, on the 15th of October last year, I was appointed to be the chair of the executive committee of CANSO, which is a global organization. Indeed, it's a huge honor and a privilege to do that. And I'm delighted to serve in those different capacities. And also, you've also mentioned the EAC, East African Community, CASOA, where I was immediate past chair, and I'm still a member. So I've gotten myself busy in domestic matters, regional matters, and also global aviation matters.
Yeah, it's fascinating, to be honest, that you've obviously been, the trials and tribulations of starting an airline, for example. You also have been a pilot, and you've been on the regulation side. So I suppose the question is, what did you prefer? Did you prefer being that pilot flying over the beautiful beaches and the grasslands of Kenya, taking tourists to and from, or do you like this role, or is it just a natural transition from one to the other?
I would say it's a natural transition from one to the other. I flew as a commercial pilot for 25 years. So I felt I had come to the end of my career in flying. So I hung up my flying boots and then got into the business of running airlines. Now that I joined the regulator, which is also the air navigation service provider and also the owner of a school, the East African School of Aviation, I find that is a natural progression to my career. And I'm now thoroughly enjoying being a regulator, air navigation service provider, and the owner of an aviation school. So it's an excellent challenge, and I'm really enjoying it. I love it.
Fantastic. So talking of challenges, obviously the last 12 months
Yes.
or so has been an incredible challenge for all of us around the world, not just in
Yes.
aviation, but
Yep.
aviation, tourism. We got hit hard, and we got hit first as well. So
Yes.
in terms of
Yes.
the impact of the pandemic on your operation and how you've managed to deal with it, can you enlighten us a little bit as to how the last 12 months has been for you?
Yeah, John, the last 12 months has been a huge challenge for uh, aviation globally, but here in Kenya, it has been a huge challenge. On the 23rd of March last year, we decided to close down the airspace of Kenya. And I'm the one who had to do it as the ANSP. The immediate impact in the month of April was a 94% drop in total traffic. Aircraft movements down 94%, which translated to a reduction in our revenue of 86%. Now, that was a tremendous shock for us. We've never been through that kind of a situation before. And I must say, we were extremely concerned about what will be the future of aviation in the country, and more particularly, what is going to be the future of Kenya Civil Aviation Authority. We have 800 employees. More than half of them are in air traffic management. Then we have the regulatory employees. We have the ones who teach at the East African School of Aviation. What's going to happen to them? So we quickly got down to work out austerity measures on how is it that we are going to remain afloat. So the first thing we had to do was to stop all development programs. And then we had some major programs that we were planning, nearly $10 million of development that we wanted to do, primarily in air traffic management, improvement and upgrading of our surveillance systems, etc., and other programs that we had for the regulator. We really had to actually stop any development funding or investment. And then the other things that we had to do was take care of our people, because in this COVID pandemic, we tended to be crowded in certain areas. So we had to now practice the physical distancing that was required. We had to now force many of our employees to work from home, and those are the ones who had the ability to work from home. But the challenge with the air traffic management, air traffic controllers cannot work from home, neither can engineers and aeronautical information service officers. So, but we had to come up with programs on how we would keep people apart from each other. So we did the physical distancing arrangements in all our area control centers and control rooms, etc. We had to shut down our school. The school was a no-go. We had to close that. And then we had to now provide funding for COVID-19 prevention measures, providing face masks, sanitizers, and PPEs where they were required. So really, that was basically what we had to do. And we said that with the reserves that we were holding, we would be able to survive with all our employees on full pay until August of last year. So we said this is about 6 months. We had a reserve. So whilst we're doing that, we said we need to think what is happening beyond August. Are we going to have to let people go? So we had to make that critical decision that yes, indeed, we would have to plan for it. So we came up with a business continuity program and a program where we would be forced to lay off the people that had to go if things did not improve. But as luck would have it, so to speak, on the 15th of July, the government of Kenya decided to reopen our airspace for domestic travel. So I opened up the airspace for domestics, and it was a very slow start in June. And then in July, it started to pick up. And then the government made the decision that from the 1st of August, we would allow international travel back again. But I also need to let you know that one thing that really saved us during this bad period was the fact that cargo operations did not have any restrictions. And in fact, the cargo operations in Kenya grew exponentially away from our normal exports and imports, fresh produce, etc., and importing machinery, etc., by air. We had a lot of movement of medicines and medical personnel to around the country, and also international. We also had a lot of flights for repatriation. Countries decided they wanted their people to go back, the UK, the US, and all places around the world. So those repatriation flights were continued. Emergency evacuations also improved a lot because people were getting COVID in places where medical facilities were not adequate. So they had to be flown in to Nairobi for better medical care. So that ancillary business that we didn't really have in a significant basis before became one of our saving graces. And then when we started international, things started to improve. Today, I'm happy to report that we are at the 80% level of where we used to be in terms of air traffic, aircraft movements, which is a good thing. So we are really looking forward to an improvement. And the way I like to call it is we don't want to go back to 2019. What we want to do is go back to the future, meaning that it's not about 2019. It's from where we are today. Let's build for a better future, which could even be better than what it was in 2019. So we're gearing up for the growth and development of aviation. And the thing that has helped the most is the vaccine program that has been developed now. First of all, there'll be a lot of cargo around Africa for flying vaccines around, distributing vaccines to the African countries. Our national carrier, Kenya Airways, has geared up for it to be able to start carrying vaccines. And whereas people get vaccinated, air transport will revive, it will recover, because restrictions around all the states in the world will start to be lifted because we'll have now taken control of the coronavirus. And then, of course, everybody is used to the three basic principles of wash your hands or sanitize, wear a mask, practice physical distance where it is possible in order to not get infected by the virus. So for me, I'm extremely optimistic about the future.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think, like you say, it was the perfect storm back last year because revenues were down, but then you were asked to invest in all of these measures and all of this equipment just to operate. And I think, that everybody has the same story. I mean, it's a fantastic, I'm very aware of the work that Kenya Airways has done and also Astral. I still get my wonderful Kenyan green beans here that Sanjeev and the Astral team bring to the local airport. So, it's great from that side to see that. And you're absolutely right in terms of the vaccine rollout. We're going to need great airlines and great logistical challenge to obviously get that spread around Africa to where it's needed. So yeah, thanks for giving us the update on that. I think there's a couple of questions to follow on that, which is, first of all, with those reduced revenues, how have you managed to ensure that the airspace is still safe and secure? And secondly, and you obviously struck quite an optimistic tone there about we're starting the recovery, we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And I believe that as well. If we don't believe and don't act positively and optimistically, then we don't have any chance anyway. But Are there any sort of benefits as a result of this in a very sort of strange way. But
Yeah.
has it led you to do things slightly differently, maybe?
Yes. Okay, thank you for that. Now, with this reduced receipts in air traffic revenue, of course, we've had to rely heavily on our retained revenue reserves. We've had to reduce our surveillance activities for our operators because we could not physically go and do inspections. So we've been relying on desktop evaluations. We've also we've decided to follow the ICAO CART program, where we were allowing extension of approvals of the various licenses and certificates that we issue. So AOCs and air service licenses, pilot license renewals, we were giving them automatic extensions in 45-day, 60-day, 90-day, or even 6 months, depending on what kind of authorization and approval or license and certificate that was issued. So it meant that it reduced our operating expenditure substantially, but relying on that revenue reserve that we had. And we thank God that we had that revenue reserve, and it is now starting to be built. So, so having reduced our activities as much as we can to save on costs, you've asked the question, with the challenge of the pandemic, has there been any benefit? Well, with every challenge, John, lies an opportunity. We need to now think, what are we going to do that is different? Look at our meetings. Look at the meeting you and I are having now. We're now on the Zoom platform. We never used to consider that before. You and I would go and meet in Kigali, although, sorry, we still haven't met in your Kigali program. I'm on my way to Kigali soon to come and meet you personally, and also hope to meet you here in Kenya personally as well. But look at our meetings; they're all virtual. So you asked the question: are we really going to get back into flying? Is flying going to recover? Because we're doing things so differently, we don't need to travel right now. But I strongly believe that the human touch, the human interaction, interface, shaking of hands and hugging, when post-pandemic, we will want to get back into it. We're humans. We are social beings. We like being with each other. We like being together with friends. So I think outside of looking at the new normal of how we conduct our business, we're just getting ourselves ready now for a full recovery where we can have person-to-person interaction. But meanwhile, the new areas of business, cargo has suddenly become like a new big thing. Cargo operations, those are going to continue. So many aircraft are now starting conversion programs. Many airlines are converting the aircraft from passenger to cargo or getting into combi type operations, which wasn't there before. So that is a new benefit. People are inventing things. There are investments in innovative technologies. We're seeing that already happening. It's not just geared towards combating the disease, but people are inventing even newer ways of doing business. There's a renewed focus in health in aviation. We always used to take things for granted. You know, as long as you've had your yellow fever certificate, that's the only thing that you used to think about in terms of health when you were flying. But now we have to consider you must have a COVID negative PCR test certificate, and you must go through the trusted traveler program so that the certificate you're holding can be verified that it's genuine, because some people have come up with fake negative certificates. So that's a new line of, or a new way of doing things in aviation that wasn't previously there. So I would say in a nutshell, those are the basic benefits that the pandemic has brought.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. We were talking about this, you know, for me personally, being based in the UK and working in Africa, I did have these things before the pandemic because most of my time I was here. So I had to rely on Zoom and WhatsApp and whatever, social media to actually connect with people. But I could never have done what we've done without physically meeting people and building those relationships and supporting people. And we love it. Like you say, we're human beings. We need to be with each other. We need to see each other. And to do business together, we need to physically be in the same room and look that person in the eye and say, is this person somebody that I can trust, I can work with? So I think, that what if I suppose what we're saying is the benefit is that we've realized how important aviation is because it brings us together in a more meaningful way than we can do. Like, this is a great solution in the short term, and I'm sure it will always be here, but there has to be some element of human interaction. And that's why, as an event organizer, we're very bullish about the future when people are vaccinated and it's safe to travel, that actually events are going to become more important than ever because we'll have been starved of them for a period of a year, 18 months, however long it's going to take to recover. So I really agree with you and I appreciate that. So let's just move on then. In terms of your current priorities right now, we're in January 2021. Hopefully the worst of the storm has passed and the vaccine is starting to roll out, etc. So what are the priorities for Kenya Civil Aviation Authority looking from now over the next few years and months?
As a ANSP, as an air navigation service provider, we want to go back to our investment program in the modernization of our air traffic management equipment. So we have a couple of projects, large projects where we want to invest. We've recently completed a new area control center. So we're moving our area control center, or ACC, away from Jomo Kenyatta Airport to a property we have a few kilometers down the road. The building is ready. And we now want to buy the equipment, and that is the monitors, radar monitors, and all the air traffic management equipment that is in our area control center, and move from Jomo Kenyatta Airport to this other Nairobi location. So the advantage is that we'll have new equipment, including ADSB and all that, the modern air traffic management equipment in a new facility. But then the current facility will become our backup, so that if there's any issue with the ACC, we'll retain the equipment we have at Jomo Kenyatta Airport, so that we will be able to seamlessly move from one ACC to another. So that is one of the programs that we want to do. We want to invest some more in our East African School of Aviation. We want to modernize our equipment for training of air traffic controllers, aeronautical information service officers, and other educational programs. We want to invest in technology, in new technology that we will be doing online programs more powerfully and effectively. So those are the kind of investments that we're looking so far. Even at the regulator, we want to introduce a fully automated system of doing our surveillance programs, our certification programs, licensing and certification. So it's a huge project. We want the entire organization automated in its processes. So we're moving from pilot licenses, which are in booklets, into a sort of credit card size license with a chip on it, with all the data that we have on each person. So all our licensed personnel will move into that regime of the smart card system. So in a nutshell, that's what's happening in KCAA.
Yeah, amazing. So, the whole idea of bringing in the technologies that exist and using those to your benefit, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that in the future, we'll be traveling with all of our travel wallet on a smartphone. That'll be our passport, our health security, something like that, which is obviously starting to roll out at the moment as well. So before we go, I wanted to kind of zoom out a bit away from Kenya and look at Africa as a whole, because of course you're involved in both global aviation and you have this seat at the table, obviously within Africa as well.
Yes.
And I want to kind of ask you about how you see the future of African integration, because a big thing at AviaDev, what we believe is that the biggest opportunities lie in route development within Africa. We need African countries being better connected. And hopefully, as if there is one positive as a result of the pandemic, it is that realization that at the moment, the international traffic is going to be the last to recover, because of course it's at the mercy of those particular countries, and there should be more investment and more care taken to actually develop the localized regional markets as well. So in terms of that, we've obviously got the SATAM, the Single African Air Transport Market initiative. We've seen the African Continental Free Trade Area be initiated this month, which is fantastic. Hopefully we can get SATAM, we can get the visa facilitation alongside. But, you know, how do you see this? How do you see this going? Are you a supporter of the idea of SATAM and the benefits that it can bring? And how positive are you about the future of African aviation, that we can do things differently so that these airlines that we talked about, your experience with airlines that haven't been able to weather the storms of economic recessions and political issues, you know, we need a robust industry. So is that the way forward basically for Africa?
Absolutely. But before I answer your question, let me mention one development that's happening in Kenya before we move to the rest of Africa. It's our Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. There's a new program for refurbishing it. Terminal 1B and Terminal 1C, there's a contract out, a one-year contract to rehabilitate and refurbish it to become more like Terminal 1A. So that is going to upgrade the airport of Nairobi, the airport of Kenya, which is of course very important for growth and development of aviation. So coming back to your question on SATAM, the Single African Air Transport Market is the flagship project of the African Union Commission, and which vision is to see the growth and development of aviation in Africa. Do I believe in SATAM? Yes, absolutely. I believe in it. I support it. Kenya itself also believes in SATAM because we have signed the solemn commitment of implementation of SATAM as a country. And so far, it's like 32 countries that have signed out of the 54. Yep. Their solemn commitment for the implementation. But there is a challenge. The challenge is in the implementation. And I think the reason for that is not all of us have understood what the benefits are. So now we're looking at airspace liberalization. That's really what SATAM is about. And the immediate benefit, I would say, is an economic benefit. Aviation today is the single largest enabler of economic development of many nations, if not all. And I think that's obvious. Outside of the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, the IT revolution, what's the next big thing in growth and development of economies? It's aviation. And it's the same for Africa. We're going to get serious economic benefits. We're going to get passenger benefits because when it's implemented, we will have a far much more effective and widespread reach around Africa, so that we would be able to have affordable travel between states. And then, so what does that mean? It will mean that if it is easy to move among African countries, it means that we can trade with each other far much more easily. We will have opportunities for tourism. You know, Kenyans would like to know, these Nigerians, who are these guys? I would like to visit them and see who are they, how do they live, what do they eat? You can develop the curiosity of what Africans wanting to visit each other. So we're saying economic benefits will be there, passenger benefits will be there, and also trade benefits will be there. But the problem is the implementation. When you liberalize your airspace, it means that in the context of SATAM, an airline can come from South Africa and start operating into Kenya, and then even go to the extent of doing domestic services, or even starting business from here and flying around Africa. Look at the model of Ryanair and EasyJet.
Yeah.
It's an Irish company. They base themselves in the UK or in Spain, and they start operations from there, and they go all over Europe. This is what will happen. It's supposed to happen in Africa, but I think people are concerned that they might lose some kind of autonomy, they might lose control, operational control. The national carriers of the countries that do have national carriers may be taken over. So there's a lot of uncertainty as to what will be the benefit of liberalization. So we will need to educate ourselves, and those people who are really supporting SATAM, we have a big job to sensitize the other states, and in particular the ones that haven't signed the solemn commitment to join SATAM, to do so, so that we can begin. And how are we going to begin? I think implementation will be regional basis. In Kenya, we have the East African community. So what we need to do is to sit down and agree as the EAC, let's make our airspace domestic, so that we're not dealing with international travel between Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, Burundi, South Sudan. It should be domestic, and all the user charges should be at domestic level. So a passenger service charge, instead of $50, it comes down to $5, which is 90% reduction in cost. We can reduce costs tremendously, so that airlines that operate now within EAC can benefit by having lower airfares.
Yep.
That lower airfare will attract movement of people, obviously. So if we can agree on the terms and conditions of how we will implement as the EAC, we would also recommend for the ECOWAS states to do the same in West Africa. For SADC, do the same in the southern part of Africa, and the guys up north do that. When we have that operational, now EAC can go and talk to ECOWAS and say, let's make ECOWAS and EAC domestic as well. So what are the terms and conditions of how we'll be able to do that? Yeah, so that now we can have Nairobi, Lagos. We can go from Dar es Salaam to Lome in Togo as a domestic flight. Obviously, the airfares will come down. So that will promote trade between the states. And John, I believe that the future of Africa is working together as Africans. We need a Pan-African strategy. If Africa can trade among itself, we will become more successful economically. We won't need to rely so much on outsiders, the Western world, on China, etc. But at the same time, we'll still continue to work with the outside world, but we want to create a bigger pie for ourselves. And that is trade among us as Africans. So the future of African aviation is bright. I would say in the next 5 years, I hope that we can get the economic, the regional blocks ready to have the terms and conditions for domestic travel. And then let's say in a 10-year period, hopefully we can get the rest of the other economic blocks to work together as domestic and promote and grow aviation in Africa. That's my view.
100%. I mean, I totally echo that. I think a couple of things from my side. The first is a lot of people that I speak to seem to think that the European example was everybody signed on and overnight the European open skies. But actually it happened like you're saying. There were some countries at the beginning and then others added on to it, and it grew. And you only have to look at what's happened in Europe in terms of passenger numbers have exploded over 25 years. The fares have come right down. The connectivity has gone right up. And ultimately, governments are not having now to subsidize national airlines because the connectivity is being provided by private carriers like EasyJet, Ryanair, etc., Wizz Air in Eastern Europe, and they're doing exactly what you're saying. So, there's a mind shift there. I think as well, talking about the economic benefits, the IATA report that was done by Intervistas back in 2014, that's 7 years ago, they did that as a sample size to say, we're going to sample 3 countries, North, South, East, and West in Africa, and we're going to show you we're going to model it. And every single one showed a huge positive, but then there's still some sort of distrust there that, actually, that might not be the case for my country. And of course, some countries in Africa have a national carrier that is struggling, and therefore increased competition is perceived that that's only going to make that carrier struggle more. And that's probably true, but what's the alternative? The alternative is continued subsidization by a taxpayer, which is also not a sustainable future. So there's a lot of questions, and I know it's very sensitive around those conversations generally as Africa. So yeah, I'm with you. I think that it has to start when we talk to Raphael, who was previously at IATA, Raphael Cucci, he said this along, and we've totally echoed it. You have to start with those who are ready to start.
Yes.
Don't wait for all 54 countries to be ready, because they'll never be ready. Start with the ones that have agreed, have implemented, have signed it. Let's get going. Let's show the rest of Africa that it can be a success, and then they will want to sign on and be part of that. So I'm with you 100%.
May I interrupt you a little?
Yeah, please.
May I add something? The struggling African carrier who's concerned about liberalization, what I would propose and recommend is that this other carrier who is more dominant or more successful, they get into a partnership, an alliance, an investment in each other. Yeah. Yes, not only an interline, but even invest in the airline itself. That's what Ethiopian is doing. They're investing in the national carrier of Zambia or Malawi, and then they now work together to build. I believe in that. So these carriers, these states shouldn't be concerned about that. Ensure that the terms and conditions mean that larger, bigger player has to come and do a meaningful investment with the local carriers who are there.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, but I also look at the current environment in East Africa, and a few years ago we had Kenya Airways and Ethiopian, and now almost not every country, but Air Tanzania is there, Rwanda Air is there, Uganda Airlines is now there, Kenya is there, and Ethiopian. And my question to always is, why aren't those airlines working together? They're competing, not collaborating. They're not interlining, they're not partnering. That is the place to start, is to say, actually, if we work together, we can both benefit, as opposed to we need to steal traffic from our neighbors. And that needs to be addressed as as an issue as well, because we're just not big enough. We don't have the traffic numbers in Africa to sustain national carriers for every single country, and therefore we all lose. So it's such an emotive subject, and it's something that I've been listening to, and the conversations are very much, they haven't changed as such, but at least we're seeing something with the SATAM implementation. So we'll come back to this. I'm sure we'll pick it up again. But before I let you go, very final question is just, what do you love the most about aviation? What is it about aviation that's made you dedicate your entire working life to it?
Seeing the movement of people by air around the world. I love to travel. I love to see new things, new experiences. And what makes that possible is air transport. So when air transport is made affordable, we can realize our dreams of going to visit our neighbor, going to visit that distant country in the Far East and see, hey, what are these guys up to? How do they live? I find that exciting. And it's air transport that makes that possible. Yeah, that's my single biggest passion about air transport.
Absolutely. And never have we felt that more keenly than over the last 12 months where we haven't been able to do that. So I think, like I say, it just strengthens the role and the importance of aviation in the global economy. So I want to say a massive thank you for giving us your time and your insight today, Captain Kibe. We really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. I really appreciate it too. Thank you, John.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot. So thank you everybody out there for taking the time to listen to us or watch us today. As always, all that we ask in terms of repayment is that you share this episode with one person in your network. Just hit that share button now on social media, on WhatsApp or Signal or Telegram or whatever you're using nowadays, and share it, with that one person who you think will benefit from having a listen. Don't forget to subscribe and also, keep in touch with us on social media, and we'll see you for the next episode very soon. Thank you all for joining us. Goodbye.